Make sure your insurance doesn't come up short. Get gap cover with ALA. For more information, follow the links in the description. Hello everybody. Today on the channel, I admit to you my forbidden love. That's right, MG Rover. More specifically, today I'm going to be talking to you about why it is that this, the MG ZS, is a car I simply cannot get out of my head, to the extent that I've bought another one. This one. This is the third MG ZS I've owned, and today I'm going to tell you why I love them so much, why I've had to buy 3 of them to find a good one, and why I've already sold this one. Welcome to today's action-packed episode of JayEmm on Cars. So, if you're watching this from Britain and you're over the age of 25, you're likely familiar with the MG ZS. But, just for the benefit of those who aren't, a very quick potted history. This was a product of the MG Rover Group, the company that came out of BMW's sale of Rover and was acquired by a company known as the Phoenix Consortium. And if ever you would like to have a look at a case of automotive injustice, just search Phoenix 4. Anyway, the Phoenix Consortium took not just MG Rover from BMW, but also a rather large dowry to help keep it going. And one of the first things that they did was relaunch the MG brand, which up until that point had consisted of the MG F, their 2-seater roadster, which is sort of alright, but already I think had a reputation for head gasket failure and misery and suffering that always accompanies just about every British car you can ever think of. At least that's what people like to say, isn't it? Anyway, they realised that this was a brand that was being underutilised, and so, to try and reinvigorate the entire company, they used it to introduce a range of sporty models, all based on the existing Rover lineup. So, the 25 hatchback was turned into the ZR, the 45 saloon then turned into this, the ZS, and the 75, which had been built with BMW money and BMW technology, was then turned into the ZT. In the last few years, I have owned examples of all of them. I bought a very nice early ZR in the perfect specification, the yellow 3-door with the 160 VVC engine, much beloved of Lotus and Caterham people. And that is a car that I paid, I think, about £2,000 for. I'm already about £8,000 into it, and I think there's about another £10,000 to go. But that's okay, because those are very, very rare things, particularly with low mileage. I also acquired a little while back a ZT. I paid £500 for it, and it was such a good car that all in I managed to lose about £3,000. And that reminds me, I was only mocking Joel yesterday for his silly Maserati purchases. I suppose really he's much smarter than I am, because at least when he's sat there financially broken, he's got a Maserati to look at. I had a tarted up 75. Now in truth, the 75 and ZT are very, very good cars. The one I bought wasn't, but by the time I was done with it, it was getting there. Anyway, the ZS is actually the one that I've got the longest history with, because way back when, in the early days of the channel, myself and my good buddy Laurie bought one sight unseen off eBay for £525. We drove it around a little bit, used it, and then both realised we did not have the money to turn it into the car that it really should have been. So we swapped it for something else with a friend. And the reason we got that car, I think, is the same reason that many people bought them in the first place. Because, on the one hand, it is a nice, decent, sensible 4-door saloon. I think it's a good looking thing too. They were facelifted shortly after this one was built, between 2004 and 2005. with the Mark II being styled by one Peter Stevens of McLaren F1 and Lotus Esprit fame, also notably Subaru 22B. And both versions, particularly in blue with the big wing on the back, have more than a hint of old school Impreza about them. In fact, looking at this one this morning, and I think it looks like the illegitimate love child of an old Impreza and a Mark II Mondeo. But those were both very much cars in vogue at the time, and I think this is not a bad looking thing. I flit between whether I prefer the looks of the Mark I or the Mark II, and I can never really make my mind up. Though it cannot be argued that the interior of the Mark I is definitely slightly more upmarket, albeit not particularly fancy. There are daft things throughout, like the fact that one of the window switches is over here on the door, where you'd kind of expect it, the other one then on the wrong side of the handbrake down here. Why not just put them both down here? This, like the majority of these, comes with the half leather, half fabric interior, which I believe was standard for the 180, though in the back you've still got windy windows. Visibility is also excellent. The A pillar, B pillars, they're all pretty thin. You can see out in every direction. You feel like you're sat a little bit high, but the reality is that's partly because you are, and partly because the bonnet is fairly low. There's so much to love about not just this, but many cars of the era. And yeah, I know there's lots to love about newer cars too, but in some ways, we did have things right back then. This one does at least have air conditioning. It's also got dealer-fit rear parking sensors. And as a normal, everyday thing, it's a lovely car, a beautiful example of why it is that us journalists like to wax lyrical about cars from 25 years ago. Because it's not that big, yet it's got plenty of room in here, just about enough for 4 adults, though not if the ones in the back are basketball players. The boot is also a very good size, and maybe the key allure of this car, it's got a nice big meaty engine up front. You see, where most of this car's rivals, certainly for the money, would have given you only a 4-cylinder, here you get a 2.5 litre V6. Okay, taken from the Freelander, but it's still a V6. And today, a 6-cylinder, petrol, naturally aspirated, with a manual, well, that already is a very good start. And because of the general unsexiness of the MG Rover brand, these have always represented really good value for money. And that one Laurie and I bought for 525 quid, that wasn't such a good one. A couple of years back, I then got offered a Mark II, which was a bit of a project, and I got that for 425 quid, which, okay, was exceptional, and it did need a fair bit done. In fact, I took a look at it and realised, you know what? This needs more done than I'm willing to do, but I don't want to see anything happen to the car. Certainly don't want it broken apart or scrapped. So I gave it to Paul, aka Project Nigel, here on YouTube. He did a few bits with it, and he then gave it to a friend of his, who has now done everything that it needed, and as far as I know, it is on the road, out there, and being enjoyed, which is great to hear. And I was very sad to part with that car, but I just knew that with the ZR already costing me a fortune, I didn't want a ZS to do exactly the same thing. You see, the ZR I'm willing to pour money into because it's a very nice example of an ideal specification low mileage car, the sort of thing you just don't tend to see. The ZS instead, though it had plenty of service history, was a higher mileage example with a okay specification. There wasn't really anything remarkable about it, and by the time you'd got it up to even a half decent standard, well, there's no way you were getting your money back. I decided to cut my losses, and that's why I got rid of it. But the idea of a ZS I loved. Part of that, I think, is because I am something of a martyr for lost causes. I love the cars that just about nobody else does. And I find myself now in the fortunate position where I do earn money through cars, and so if I can use that to try and get these cars into conditions that many other people wouldn't, well, I think it's only right and fair. And there is another side to all of this. I don't just buy these old basket case cars because I've got a bit of a soft spot for them, and I feel really bad about the fact that if, when I were young, one of my friend's parents turned up in an old Rover, we'd have mocked them mercilessly. Oh, no. That is a small part of it. but that is certainly far from the whole picture. No, I love these cars because when it actually comes down to it, they're really quite good to drive. See, back in the day, one of the reasons people mocked these is because they're all terribly out of date in here, and underneath you have simply an old Honda chassis. For this, you see, is based on the Rover 45, which itself is a facelift of the 400, which itself is based on the Honda Domani of 1992. But to us petrol heads, what this means is that under here you have at the front a double wishbone suspension, at the back a multi-link one, and for whatever reason this also means a terrible turning circle. But if you're a fan of automotive genealogy and you start digging, you will find that this car is actually, okay, a distant cousin, but a cousin nonetheless of the mighty Honda Integra Type R DC2. Thing is though, this has got a V6, and should you find yourself doubtful and thinking that all sounds like total hogwash, a way of justifying buying yet another terrible old British car, well, I can tell you right now, it's not. First off, that engine, it's a peach. Okay, it's got just the 175 horsepower and 177 pounds-feet of torque. That's about 230 newton-meters. But it also doesn't have much to carry. These cars weigh in at an impossibly light 1,250 kilos. This week, I've also been driving a Mazda RX-8. That weighs in at nearly 150 kilos more. It's incredible. And unlike that Mazda, put your foot down at 3,000 RPM, and this has got a lot to say for itself. Okay, it's not the zingiest engine in the world, but this particular example feels the healthiest and keenest of all ZS's that I've ever driven. And that might have something to do with the fact that this is also the lowest mileage ZS I've ever driven. See, as soon as I sold that last one, I decided to keep one eye on Auto Trader and have a look to see if anything interesting cropped up. And for a long while, what I was after was a yellow one to match the ZR. And a couple did appear, but people were asking pretty big money for them, £6,000 or £7,000. And beyond the colour, I wasn't convinced that they were particularly good examples. There are also a couple of dealers out there buying up cars which were for sale at very little money, putting them up for sale for very big money, and without much apparently being done to justify it. This one then appeared, and it was advertised as having very low mileage, being in very good condition, other than the door cards and the headliner, which are very, very common for these, to the point that I would say they do all go. But it looked clean, tidy. It's got a bit of a scratch on the near side near the petrol filler, which also doesn't quite want to close properly, but even the engine bay is pretty good. It doesn't have 2,000 owners, and it was advertised as having reams of service history. Now, I put a bid in on eBay, and long story short, I won it. But it is a short story that I want to make long, so I will be recording a whole video on the process of getting this car, because it was way more complicated than it needed to be, and there were a couple of things that were not as described. Now, fortunately for me, I'd already got a few parts in to put on the last car that I had, and they fit both the Mark 1 and the Mark 2. So I already had a set of fresh Yokohama tyres, I already had a set of fresh discs and pads to go on, and I've also now had it sent down to my local garage, and they have done everything to service it. So we've done the notoriously expensive belt kit, which itself is £600, maybe a bit more actually. I didn't really want to look too closely at the invoice. We've also done all of the fluids, filters, everything. Now, this is actually the first time I've driven the car properly in quite some time, because not long after I got it, the MOT expired. I also knew that it did need a long overdue service, and I didn't want to put too many miles on the car knowing that. Apparently, it has been serviced in the recent past, but with no evidence of it, you always have to assume the worst. But I gotta say, this thing is wonderful. The steering's not quite as good as in that RX-8, It's on the light side, but once you get dialed into it, it's actually quite feelsome. And the suspension is wonderful. It may not be the fanciest parts, but the overall design is very good, and it means this thing is utterly joyful for driving down a road like this. And maybe the standout feature in this particular car is the gearbox, which is by far the best of any ZS that I've driven. To find cars in this condition is very, very difficult indeed. And when you do, it's a reminder of just how good they can be. Now, there's a million reasons why you might not want to buy yourself an MG ZS. They suffer from all of the problems you've ever heard of, and then some more. The variable intake system on the engines, that starts to rattle and break, and that means they don't perform as well. That needs fixing. Though luckily now it's not as expensive to sort as it was 10 or 15 years ago, when the general consensus was you just replace it. Most parts can be acquired, though some things are now no longer available, so occasionally you have to get a little clever. Happily, all the regular maintenance stuff, easy to get. They can and will corrode with a few well-known hot spots, meaning that you do have to keep an eye on that. And, as is the case with many cars that offer decent performance for not a lot of money, well, things can and will go wrong, and often bodges are implemented as opposed to proper fixes. And that is just one of many reasons why, should you decide to go and get yourself an old MG Rover, you need to use CarVertical, the super-powered super search that cross-references a number of databases from around the globe to give you all the information you want to know on any potential used car purchase, including mileage discrepancies, accident damage, involvement in fire, theft, or, as unlikely as it seems, outstanding finance. Best of all, for 20% off the service, don't forget to use my discount code JayEmm. Just last week, I got Ben from Mile by Mile Valeting, who I'm now going to call Ben the Sparkle, to come down and give it the full works for its new owner. And if you'd like to try and support a true petrol head that is trying to make cars not just his passion, but his business, and if you're somewhere in the Three Counties, Bedfordshire, Central England area, please do give Ben a ring. He's been looking after my fleet for a couple of months now, and he's done a fantastic job. He's a great guy, and he does great work. You can find his details in the description down below. And when it comes to engines, you could get a diesel, though nobody wants this. The 4-cylinder petrol, well, those are the K-series engine, well known for head gasket failure, though in all honesty, that just wouldn't worry me these days. It's very, very easy to rectify, and for the most part, they've already been sorted. This, though, the V6, is a much stronger, healthier unit, but does have a couple of drawbacks. First of which, the fuel consumption. Treated nicely, this will return about 27 to the gallon, which for the sort of people looking for a car like this is often a bit too much. And one of the reasons that Laurie and I parted with our original ZS is because at the time, we just couldn't afford the fuel bill. The other big issue then for the V6 is that cam belt service. It will set you back at least 600 quid, and that's just because there are not only 3 belts, but they're also in a fairly inaccessible place. However, if you do want to buy into one of these cars or any other MG Rover product of the time, there are a few mobile specialists out there that'll come to you and do the job very well. And there are still plenty of garages around the country that once upon a time may have been MG Rover main dealers and still retain both the kit and the knowledge to do the job. And this is also the kind of car, particularly in this condition, where you turn up at any meet and people will look at it and go, oh crikey, I remember those, or I had one, a mate had one, oh we missed that car. It's got a real happy vibe about it, this thing. So why is it that I'm selling it? Well, that's fairly simple. With the car having such low mileage, I felt bad about turning it into my daily. I'm currently on the hunt for a sensible 4-door, 4-seater, and this would fit the bill absolutely perfectly. However, I found myself just not wanting to drive it, not wanting to add to that mileage. I wanted to preserve it, which is all fine and dandy, and I had no issue with that. I knew that eventually I wanted to get it sorted, get it fixed, get it serviced, and put some miles on it in the summer, but for the most part, it just sat at the back of my storage. And then 2 things happened. First off, a lovely chap called Dan got in touch and said, James, I'm on the hunt for something that's sub £5,000, interesting, I'm not worried about fuel economy, but I do want it to drive fairly well and have space for the family and some stuff. I loved your MG ZS180 video. Have you got any recommendations? And I said, well, if you like the ZS180 video, why don't you buy a ZS180? And he said, yeah, but they're all rust buckets. And I thought, well, this one isn't. This one's pretty good, actually. So I said, well, you don't know about this, but I do have one, and you know what? I'd rather see it be used. The other thing that happened was another good friend of mine got in touch, and he knows there is a particular car that I've been on the hunt for quite some time, only I didn't really want to pay full up for one. He then found an example which had been lying around for a little while, but was otherwise in very good condition, simply needs a recommissioning. And he said, look, this is available, and if we're quick, I think we can nab it. So I said to Dan, right, tell you what, if you want the MG, it's yours, because now I've found my sensible 4-seater, 4-door. This is going to be surplus to requirements, and I'm going to need the money. So a deal was done. I have charged him £4,000 for this car, which was the cost of the car, plus about £1,000 towards service. Now, all in, this still means I'm losing a fair bit of money, about 1,500 quid. But you know what? I am very happy to see it go to somebody that's going to appreciate it and enjoy it. I might also have made him promise that when he's done with it, he'll give it back to me. So, there we have it. That is a little look at a car you didn't know that I had, and you're not likely to see again. My MG ZS180. What's your guilty pleasure? I'd love to know. Hop into the comment section, tell me, and if you haven't already, make sure to hit that subscribe button too. I shall see you for the next one. Bye-bye.